The first time I ventured into the dense woods behind our cabin, the sun painted the world in shades of golden amber. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, and the rustle of leaves beneath my boots echoed with a comforting familiarity. I was excited, eager to prove my worth to my father, an avid hunter who had taught me everything I knew about the sport. Little did I know that the woods held secrets darker than any game I had ever pursued. As dusk settled in, I found myself deeper in the forest than I had ever been before. The canopy of ancient trees loomed overhead, blocking out the remaining slivers of daylight. The scent of pine and damp earth hung heavy in the air, and I tightened my grip on the cold metal of my rifle. My father had warned me that hunting after dark could be treacherous, but youthful overconfidence had a way of dismissing such concerns. My footsteps were barely a whisper against the forest floor, and the world felt eerily silent. No birds chirped, no leaves rustled. The woods held its breath as if it sensed something was amiss. I moved with an acute awareness of my surroundings, my senses on high alert. The first inkling that something was terribly wrong came when I heard it, a haunting, mournful howl that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the forest. My heart quickened, and I tried to convince myself that it was just a coyote or a wolf. But there was a quality to the sound that sent shivers down my spine, a twisted, unnatural cadence that didn't belong to any ordinary animal. I pushed onward, determined to bag a deer before returning to the safety of our cabin. But the forest seemed to conspire against me. Shadows danced at the periphery of my vision, and the trees themselves appeared to shift, as though they were alive and watching. A sense of unease crept over me, and the world took on a surreal, dreamlike quality. It was then that I stumbled upon a clearing bathed in an eerie, sickly green glow. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient gnarled oak tree, its bark twisted into grotesque contortions. A thick fog clung to the ground, swirling in unnatural patterns, and I felt an overwhelming compulsion to approach the tree. I knew I should turn and run, flee from this unholy place, but an invisible force drew me closer, my steps slow and deliberate. As I reached the base of the twisted oak, I saw it, a tangle of roots that resembled a crude, nightmarish altar. On it lay the remains of animals, their lifeless eyes staring blankly into the abyss. Panic coursed through me, and I tried to back away, but my legs refused to obey. The howling in the distance grew louder, more insistent, and I realized with a sinking dread that I was not alone. Glowing eyes, like twin orbs of malevolent fire, materialized in the shadows, circling the clearing. They belonged to creatures I could not comprehend, their forms shifting and morphing as if they were part of the very darkness itself. The fog thickened, wrapping around me like icy fingers, and I felt an otherworldly presence pressing down on me, suffocating me. Desperation clawed at my chest as I struggled to break free, but the forest had become a prison, and I was its captive. Suddenly, the clearing erupted into a symphony of nightmarish cacophony. The creatures with the glowing eyes descended upon the altar of death, feasting upon the remains of the sacrificed animals. Their maws tore into flesh and bone with a sickening crunch, their guttural growls echoing in my ears. I watched in horrified fascination, unable to tear my gaze away. The howling reached a crescendo, and the twisted oak tree seemed to come alive, its branches writhing and contorting like serpents. From its twisted limbs, a host of nightmarish figures descended, their forms shifting and distorting as they touched the ground. They moved with unnatural grace, their movements a grotesque parody of the animals they mimicked. I was trapped, paralyzed by fear as they closed in around me, their eyes gleaming with malevolence. In that moment, I understood the true horror of the woods, the ancient malevolent force that lurked within. My father's warnings had not been idle tales. They were a desperate plea to stay away from this accursed place, but it was too late. The creatures circled me, their whispers of an unknown language sending shivers down my spine. I knew I was their prey, a sacrifice to whatever dark deity they worshipped. My rifle felt useless in my trembling hands, a feeble attempt at defiance against forces beyond my comprehension. As the first creature lunged, its teeth bared in a grotesque grin, I closed my eyes and whispered a desperate prayer. In that moment, the howling wind and eerie green glow faded away, replaced by the familiar sensation of leaves crunching beneath my boots. I opened my eyes to find myself on the outskirts of the forest, the first rays of dawn breaking through the trees. The woods had returned to their natural state, the malevolent presence banished. My heart pounded, and I stumbled back towards the safety of our cabin, vowing never to return to those cursed woods again. That nightmarish hunt at dusk had taught me a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my days, a lesson about the ancient sinister forces that can lurk in the most seemingly innocuous of places. My father's warnings were not to be taken lightly, for there are places in this world where the line between reality and nightmare is thin, and once you cross it, there may be no way back. The forest loomed before me, a dark and impenetrable fortress. Every leaf rustled with secrets, every tree whispered ancient tales of the land. I clutched my rifle with trembling hands, excitement and trepidation churning in my gut. It was my first solo hunt, an initiation into the sacred tradition passed down through generations. The autumn sun had begun its slow descent, casting long, haunting shadows that seemed to reach out for me. My father's words echoed in my mind as I ventured deeper into the woods. Respect the forest, son, and it will provide. Disrespect it, and it can take far more than you can imagine. I had heard the legends, the stories told around campfires on chilly nights, of hunters who had vanished without a trace, of eerie sightings in the woods, and of something lurking just beyond the edge of reality. But I had dismissed them as the fanciful tales of superstitious minds. As twilight wrapped its inky fingers around the trees, I made my way to a small clearing that was said to be teeming with game. My heart raced with anticipation, my senses sharpened by the fading light. I was confident, perhaps even arrogant, that I could conquer the forest. The woods grew quieter as if holding its breath. I squatted low, silently waiting for a deer to step into my sights. Minutes stretched into hours, and the chill of the evening air began to gnaw at my bones. I fought the growing unease that prickled at the back of my neck. Then I heard it, a soft rustling like the whisper of silk against the leaves. My pulse quickened, and I adjusted my aim, focusing on the source of the sound. There, in the dim twilight, I spotted movement, a magnificent buck, its antlers gleaming in the fading light. My heart swelled with excitement as I steadied my rifle and took aim. But just as I was about to squeeze the trigger, something strange happened. The deer's eyes, previously locked on the ground, suddenly snapped to meet mine. They were not the eyes of a prey animal. They were filled with intelligence and something else, a deep, ancient sorrow. A shiver ran down my spine as I stared into those eyes, paralyzed by an inexplicable fear. The forest seemed to come alive around me, the trees shifting and contorting as if they were sentient beings. It was as if the very woods were warning me, urging me to abandon my pursuit. I lowered my rifle, unable to pull the trigger. The deer turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me with a sense of profound unease. Had I just witnessed something unnatural, or was my imagination playing tricks on me? As darkness settled in, I decided to retreat and regroup. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the forest itself was a sentient entity, judging my every move. I made my way back to camp, shaken but determined to return the next day and redeem myself. That night, as I lay in my tent, a sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. The forest seemed to press in on all sides, its presence suffocating. I tried to shake off the unease and convince myself that it was just my imagination, that the stories and legends were mere superstition. But then I heard it, a faint, mournful cry that sent shivers down my spine. It was the sound of a woman weeping, her sobs echoing through the darkness. I unzipped my tent and stepped outside, the forest silent around me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" The weeping continued, growing louder and more desperate. It seemed to emanate from all directions, as if the very forest itself were weeping. Panic seized me, and I fumbled for my flashlight, casting its feeble beam into the surrounding darkness. That's when I saw her, a woman, or what appeared to be a woman, standing at the edge of the clearing. She was dressed in tattered, ethereal robes that seemed to sway with an otherworldly breeze. Her long, dark hair obscured her face, and she continued to weep, her cries haunting and sorrowful. "Are you okay?" I called out, taking a cautious step toward her. But as I approached, a profound sense of dread washed over me. The woman's face remained hidden, and her cries took on a chilling, unnatural quality. It was as if her grief was not of this world, as if she were a ghost trapped in a never-ending torment. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, and the weeping woman slowly began to glide toward me, her movements graceless and surreal. In the dim light, I could see her eyes, hollow and filled with a malevolent hunger that sent terror coursing through my veins. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The weeping grew fainter as I distanced myself from the clearing, but I dared not stop until I reached the safety of my camp. I barricaded myself in my tent, praying that the dawn would come quickly and banish the horrors of the night. When morning finally arrived, I emerged from my tent, shaken but alive. The forest lay quiet, as if nothing had happened. I packed up my gear and left the woods behind, vowing never to return to that cursed place. I had learned a lesson that could not be ignored, a lesson about the ancient malevolent forces that can lurk in the heart of the wilderness. The forest was not simply a collection of trees and animals. It was a realm of secrets and shadows, a place where the line between reality and nightmare was thin, easily crossed. I would carry that lesson with me for the rest of my days, a chilling reminder that some hunts are better left unfulfilled. My name is Daniel, and I've been a hunter for as long as I can remember. The woods have always been my sanctuary, a place of solitude and exhilaration. But there was one hunt, one chilling night, that turned my love for the forest into a nightmarish ordeal. It was the dead of winter, the moon hanging low in the frigid sky like a pale ghost. My breath billowed out in frosty plumes as I trekked deeper into the heart of the forest. The snow crunched beneath my boots, each step echoing in the quiet night. The prey for this hunt was a legendary buck, spoken of only in hushed whispers around campfires. Its antlers were said to rival the size of a small tree, and its coat was as white as the driven snow. The locals called it the ghost buck, and it was a prize that every hunter dreamt of, but few had lived to claim. My breath quickened as I followed the tracks through the dense thicket, the anticipation building with each passing moment. The night was clear and still, the world cloaked in an eerie silence. I pushed forward, my heart pounding, determined to prove myself as a hunter. Hours passed, and the moon crept higher in the sky. I followed the tracks deeper into the woods, my senses sharp, and my instincts honed to a razor's edge. But the forest seemed to change around me, the trees growing taller and more twisted, their branches gnarled and foreboding. Then I saw it, a flash of movement in the distance. My pulse quickened, and I crouched low, my eyes fixed on the figure ahead. It was the ghost buck, its massive antlers glinting in the moonlight, and its eyes as cold and unforgiving as the winter itself. I raised my rifle, taking careful aim. This was it, the culmination of years of hunting and preparation. I squeezed the trigger and the shot rang out, echoing through the night. But the buck vanished into the shadows before my eyes, as if it had never been there at all. I rushed to the spot where it had stood, but there was no sign of the creature, no blood trail to follow. It was as if the ghost buck had melted into the very fabric of the forest, a phantom that defied capture. I stood there, my breath visible in the cold air, feeling a growing sense of unease. As I retraced my steps, a deep chill settled over me, one that had nothing to do with the winter cold. The woods had grown darker, the trees closing in around me like malevolent sentinels. I heard whispers in the wind, unintelligible voices that seemed to come from all directions. I quickened my pace, eager to escape the eerie stillness of the forest. But with each step the whispers grew louder, their words a sinister murmur that sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the tone was unmistakable. A cold, mocking laughter that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the woods. I stumbled into a clearing, and there in the center I saw it. The ghost buck, its eyes fixed on me with an unnatural intensity. It was not alone. It was surrounded by a pack of wolves, their eyes gleaming with a malevolent hunger. But these were no ordinary wolves. They were massive, their fur mottled with unnatural shades of gray and black. Panic seized me, and I raised my rifle, firing at the wolves in a desperate bid to protect myself. But the bullets passed through them as if they were specters, leaving no mark. The pack closed in, their howls merging with the eerie whispers that filled the air. I turned to flee, but the forest had become a labyrinth of twisting trees and shifting shadows. I was lost, disoriented, and the wolves were relentless in their pursuit. I could feel their hot breath on my neck, their icy jaws snapping at my heels. I stumbled and fell, my heart pounding in my chest. The wolves closed in, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly malevolence. I closed my eyes, resigned to my fate, but instead of teeth and claws, I felt something else, a numbing cold that seeped into my very soul. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the forest. I was standing in a vast, desolate expanse of darkness, the sky above a swirling maelstrom of stars. The wolves were gone, replaced by a figure that loomed before me, tall and imposing. It was the ghost buck, its eyes filled with an ancient, terrible wisdom. It spoke to me, not with words, but with images and emotions, a sense of betrayal, of trespassing into a realm I could never understand. It showed me the souls of hunters who had come before me, their restless spirits condemned to wander these dark woods for all eternity. I tried to speak, to beg for mercy, but my voice was lost in the void. The ghost buck raised its massive antlers, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. Darkness enveloped me, and I knew no more. I awoke in my tent, the first light of dawn filtering through the canvas. It took me a moment to realize that I was back in the forest, alive and unharmed. It had all been a nightmarish dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear. I stumbled out of my tent, my body trembling with a deep, bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the winter. The forest lay before me, unchanged and eerily silent. But I knew that something had shifted, that the woods held secrets darker than any I had ever encountered. I packed up my gear and left the forest behind, vowing never to return to those haunted woods. The legend of the ghost buck was no myth. It was a warning, a testament to the ancient malevolent forces that can lurk in the heart of the wilderness. I had been a hunter all my life, but that night, I became the hunted, and the forest had shown me a darkness beyond imagination. It was a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my days, a chilling reminder that some hunts are best left alone, and that the woods can be a realm of nightmares lurking just beyond the shadows. I've been an avid hunter for most of my life. There's a certain serenity I find in the woods, a connection to the natural world that soothes my soul. But there was one hunting trip, one horrifying encounter in the heart of those dark woods that I can never forget. It was the peak of autumn, the forest ablaze with vibrant reds and golds, when I decided to venture deep into the woods. The target of my hunt was the legendary phantom stag, a creature whispered about around campfires, said to be a harbinger of doom, with antlers that shimmered like moonlight on water. As I delved deeper into the forest, the rustling of leaves beneath my boots and the chirping of birds filled the air. The woods had always been my sanctuary, but that day, an eerie quiet seemed to cling to the trees, as if the very forest itself held its breath. The sun cast long, dark shadows through the trees, and I felt an inexplicable sense of unease. But I brushed it off as pre-hunt jitters and continued to follow the trail of tracks, determined to prove myself as a hunter. Hours passed, and the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest into an unsettling twilight. I knew I was getting closer to my prey, and my heart quickened with anticipation. The phantom stag was known for its elusiveness, but I was determined to be the one to capture it. Then, in a moonlit clearing, I saw it, the phantom stag. Its antlers glowed with an otherworldly light, casting an eerie halo around its majestic form. I raised my rifle, my hands steady with excitement, and took careful aim at the creature. But as I prepared to fire, the stag turned and locked eyes with me. Time seemed to slow as we stared at each other, and I was overcome by a strange, foreboding sensation. The forest grew eerily still, as if it were holding its breath. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the trigger. In that moment, the stag vanished into thin air, leaving me in stunned disbelief. I fired a shot into the empty clearing, but there was no sign of the creature. It was as if it had never been there at all. I searched the area, hoping to find some trace of the phantom stag, but there was nothing. The forest had grown silent, the shadows closing in around me. A chill settled over me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As I made my way back to my camp, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I quickened my pace, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the woods. The moon hung low in the sky, its pale light casting eerie shapes among the trees. That night, as I lay in my tent, I couldn't shake the sensation that I was not alone. The woods seemed to come alive with strange, ghostly sounds, the faint whisper of voices, the soft rustle of leaves, and the distant echoes of a haunting, mournful cry. I unzipped the tent and peered out into the darkness. What I saw sent a shiver down my spine. Ghostly figures moved among the trees, their forms flickering like dimly lit lanterns. They were hunters, their translucent bodies adorned in tattered clothing, their eyes hollow and vacant. I watched in horror as they moved with purpose, their ghostly rifles raised, their faces twisted in anguish. They were hunting the phantom stag, just as I had been, and they seemed to be caught in an eternal cycle of pursuit. The air grew heavy with sorrow as I realized the truth. The hunters were spirits, trapped in the woods, cursed to relive their hunt for all eternity. The mournful cry I had heard earlier was the phantom stag's lament, a haunting reminder of their fate. I knew I had to leave, to escape the eerie forest that had become a realm of the supernatural. I gathered my belongings and fled, stumbling through the darkness, guided only by the dim moonlight. When I finally emerged from the woods, I found myself on the outskirts of town, the first light of dawn breaking on the horizon. The eerie sounds of the ghostly hunt had faded, and I was once again in the realm of the living. I vowed never to return to those haunted woods, where the past and present collided in a terrifying cycle of despair. The legend of the Phantom Stag was no mere myth. It was a chilling reality, a testament to the ancient, restless spirits that dwelled in the heart of the wilderness. I had been a hunter all my life, but that night, I became a witness to a haunting, a participant in a hunt that defied explanation. It was a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my days, a chilling reminder that some pursuits are better left unfulfilled, and that the woods can be a realm of nightmares lurking just beyond the shadows. Thanks for watching. Don't miss out on more spine-chilling tales. Subscribe now for weekly scares. Hit that red button and join our journey into the unknown.